Hi, welcome to What the Flick. I'm Christy, that's Alonzo, that's Ben, that's Matt. We've all seen a movie. What? This is it.
A Christmas miracle.
It's
a Christmas movie too.
It is.
A lot of spit
Is
came
it?
out there.
Is it a Christmas movie?
No, it's just coming out of Christmas.
Oh, I thought it was like a movie with Christmas in it inadvertently.
No, not at all.
All right.
Couldn't be
Live
less
by
great.
the night
First of
before
all,
Christmas.
it's set in Tampa, where they don't even have Christmas.
Okay, so live by night.
Now we get letters.
And Matt is going to describe.
Yes.
Live by Night.
Live by Night is the story of a Irish gangster played by Ben Affleck, who does some jail time in New York and then heads
Boston.
down Boston. Same thing.
Boston.
Charlestown, specifically. Charlestown, where the town is set.
Right, in Boston, and then
not
he
Boston,
heads
it's
back
Charlestown.
Charlestown.
It's a totally different town.
Whatever.
It's across the river. It's a totally
Up
different
north.
town.
He's a Yankee.
Totally different town.
It's
He's
totally
a Yankee
different.
gangster
St.
that
Paul
goes
was
down
a
There's a
totally
bridge.
different
There's
town.
a bridge that connects them. It's separate.
And what's the bridge go over?
The Mystic River.
No, the Charles.
No. That's the Mass Avenue Bridge.
All right, that's
We
going to
have
be
been
Charles would be
Friday
Cambridge.
morning.
Right, and
Right, it's not.
fine.
No, it's Charlestown.
it's the other.
It's where Bunker Hill is.
Bunker
the
Hill?
Bunker Hill
I
Memorial.
thought that was in New York.
No, Bunker
I don't
Hill.
know anything.
All right,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
There's a
Anyway,
town with
not
a
a total-
jail.
So he is an Irish gangster that, Yankee gangster that heads down to down to Tampa, starts some shenanigans, falls in love, things go sideways. Let's watch it.
Even if you win today's battle, there's so much violence in what you do.
You don't think I'm strong enough?
I don't know if you're cruel enough.
Powerful men don't have to be cruel. I signed up to fight in the war. I went away a soldier. I came home an outlaw.
There, how's that?
So the Lehane book is very good, and it's about this sort of Irish American family, the Coughlin's, and the complicated relationship with his dad, which the movie does pretty good with Ben Affleck and Brendan Gleeson.
For
You
like
see
two
it.
scenes.
It's two scenes, but at least you get the weight of it a little.
The dad is the superintendent of police.
and his son is a criminal.
Yeah.
And his father knows his son's a criminal, and yet, and if he catches him at something, he would arrest him, but he's not.
Right.
They still meet occasionally, but it's obviously strained, and there's something complicated with the mother that's referenced, and that seems important to them. And as I recall, that was much more drawn out in the book, where in the movie, when he goes to Tampa, when Affleck goes to Tampa, it's because he comes under the spell, or he comes to work for the
Italian mob.
the Italian mob, which is suddenly it's the Irish mob going to work for the guy from the Irish mob going to work. But Affleck was always kind of a loner. That was also his thing. He did his own thing inside but he goes to work for this guy because in the book, in prison, that guy saved his life and he owed him. Except maybe he set up the whole thing in the book to save his life, to get him to owe. But in the movie,
Like in the Raid
it's just
2.
they're not even in prison together. And the book, the whole how we know who Coughlin is because I think he spends 4 years in prison, and that means at Charlestown Prison, which that sets up. There's like 150 pages of prison.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I heard there's a
barely
lot of
it's
that
a
in the
movie.
book.
And there's
It's
no-
a
They don't have
blip
that
in the
context
movie.
at
Nothing.
all,
It's like they were going to shoot it and then didn't spare. There's nothing.
Well, there's
It's
a
not-
lot of that we'll talk about.
And had they, it's like fine if you're not gonna, you don't have to treat the book like sacred text if you're doing
No,
an
of course not.
adaptation.
It's a
You
mystery
can
novel,
go.
yeah, right.
But again, then it's incumbent upon you to do something else that's equally or more interesting, and they don't really do that here.
Right, and the reason that first of all, we just did 18 prison movies on TCM with Frank Darabont. So
Wow.
I was into prison movies at the time.
You were imprisoned. by prison movies.
But right, of course you could do whatever you want with a Dennis Lehane book, and I'm not knocking Lehane; he's a really good writer. But the prison part was great. And the idea of that prison and sort of run by the most vicious, vindictive inmates and needing to form alliances, but not in the way we think of alliances like on Sons of Anarchy now. Like it just seemed, I felt like, ooh, this is what it was like to be in Charlestown Prison in the 30s. It sucked, right?
He's definitely more interested, it seems, in the trappings of it, right?
That's
like
right.
the production design and the costumes, and so setting the interesting stuff in the prison wouldn't have served his bigger,
that's true.
grandiose gangster
Super great.
film.
It looks like all us.
No, I was going to say that's the best part of the movie, I think, is how it looks,
Yeah.
because one of my problems with Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them was that here we're supposed to be getting 1920s New York, and it all felt so green screened and airless and artificial, and this movie feels tactile and analog, and like I don't think I've ever seen a movie with this many vintage cars in a chase/accident.
Yeah.
Usually the vintage cars, like you can tell that the owner is just off camera going, "Don't touch it, don't."
But didn't you think the place like that was set in Boston, and it was less the vintageness, although there were still plenty of vintage cars, it was less so in Tampa. In Tampa.
Maybe Tampa is just not at
And
that
maybe
point in
the
time
car
as
town.
rich.
Right, and it's
as
super.
rich
And again,
visually,
reading
I
about
don't
Tampa,
know.
then it's super interesting. You see the beginnings of Florida. It's so not like Florida, not at all like Tampa now, but somehow that part of the country isn't.
I kind of bought it as the South, really. Like
That's
so
right. It's much more the South than Florida.
yeah.
right?
So those sort of like the cicadas at night and the little sweaty nightclubs, and the Klan and the like that's the way the sunlight comes through the windows of that cigar factory and stuff. Like I loved looking at this
that's
movie.
true. That's
Robert Richardson shot it.
Yeah.
It was
That's beautiful. No
Tarantino's guy.
question.
Says
felt
he's
like-
dookie.
I felt like this movie was trying to pass itself off as something akin to like Gatsby, where it's trying to go for this like portrait of society and the rise and fall of society against this gangster, against the backdrop of this gangster story. And it never quite gets there. Like it has aspirations to be this statement almost, like this slice of life, similar to like trying to capture, the aspirations of Affleck and by extension the country as a whole.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's the 20s and the
Right.
sort of dream of instant wealth and whatever. Yeah.
Right, and I just felt like in doing that, because you see these elements where like, part of it's the way it's directed is just things are supposed to feel, I guess, more weighty than they are, right? Like he keeps talking about like, oh, we're trying to build this great thing, and we know that prohibition's going to end, and we've got to have our almost like The Godfather does this really good version of that.
You've
right?
seen this a million times. We want to go legit. We're going to build this
Right.
casino, and we'll be above board now, and
Well, the thing is, I can tell you exactly what Ben Affleck intended here, because when Alonzo and I saw it, there was a whole separate screening set up just for LA film critics before we voted, and Ben Affleck introduced it and told us what he intended with this, and he wanted it to be, and you would love this, he was name-checking all these classic movies like Angels with Dirty Faces, like movies that he wanted this to emulate.
Little Caesar.
Solid, old school
Warner
gangster
Brothers gangster
pictures.
movies.
Warner
Very
Brothers
specific
gangster.
Warner Brothers, yes.
Okay.
And so that's what he was aiming for here. And I feel like he gets it from an aesthetic and a visual perspective. But in terms of momentum,
Yeah,
in terms
those
of dramatic
movies-
heft, like you don't ever care about the big important things that are supposed to be going down here. It's just like going through the motions, and it's dressed
Right.
up beautifully.
Because
and that's
those movies have a propulsion to
Yes.
them.
This does
that
not.
This really just doesn't have.
And the thing is, like, if you look at Affleck's movies up till now as a director, I mean, like, Gone Baby Gone and The Town, I think, have this really kind of raw energy. They're almost sort of Don Siegel-y in a way. They're very lean and no nonsense. Argo's a different kind of movie, but it succeeds in its own way. And then this, it just kind of feels bloated and meandering. His performance isn't very good,
No.
and I think he's a good actor, but you never get that. The idea is, oh man, I was in World War II or World War I. I've seen some shit. I'm not going to take any orders from
No,
people.
it's almost-
And he doesn't have that heft.
It's like, look, we did all this great production design, and by God, we're going to show it all.
Yeah.
At the and so you get these shots that last longer than they should, and it slows the pacing down because it's almost like, look at all this production design, look at the scenery,
you were
and we're taking too long. Like,
you expected them to stop, and then Eastwood and who shot it?
Robert Richardson.
So Eastwood, that Affleck and Robert Richardson would come on and be like, okay, now take a look at what we did here, right? And you'd be like, oh wow, that's
And
nice.
meanwhile, like he's got the two major relationships he has in the movie with women. Neither of them are very interesting. First, he's involved with Sienna Miller, who is the girlfriend of the head of the Irish mob, which is what gets him into trouble. The mob mall, yeah, no, I love that word. And then, in Tampa, he falls for Zoe Saldana, who's this Cuban heiress who's involved with getting the molasses in that they can make rum out of. And there's no spark in either of those relationships. The most interesting woman in the movie is Elle Fanning, who plays the daughter of Chris Cooper, who's the local sheriff. She goes off to Hollywood to become a star. They turn into a junkie. Affleck's character rescues her, I think, in a way to try and get leverage over Chris Cooper, but then what happens is she becomes this sort of Amy Semple McPherson like revival preacher. You know, she shows off the track marks on her arms, and that wows the crowd. And so when she starts preaching against this casino that Affleck wants to build, then it's like, oh, now we have a movie.
Right,
like
that's the movie
But
I
we
wanna
took
see.
forever to get here.
They have,
Very
they have
long time.
chemistry, they have tension that crackles.
That's
And
the
then,
movie I want to
and
see.
then that is resolved in incredibly unsatisfying
Yes,
fashion.
that's
Once
true,
they have
too.
that story, and again, I only bring up the book because I know it didn't have to be resolved in unsatisfying fashion. So
Right, and especially because that character that she plays has a level of self-awareness that I think you normally don't see in a movie. A lot of times, those characters are painted as these like Bible-thumping cliches, and you see,
she's super
she's got
interesting.
a couple lines where she knows, like she kind of knows what she's doing.
She's more cynical than you
She's
expect.
more
She acknowledges
cynical.
what's happening
And
here,
it's-
yeah.
that's really intriguing, and like I want to see. God, I wish they would have focused more on that. That would have been that's a really fascinating setup.
We should mention really fast, if you look this movie up on IMDb, you'll notice that Scott Eastwood gets second billing. Scott Eastwood is not in this movie at all. It's very strange. He is the brother of Ben Affleck's character. He's referred to multiple times, and I don't know what happened there. He must have been, he was cut out entirely.
Yeah, and it's like, you know,
so
movies
weird.
movies get re-edited
So
and they do,
weird.
like the people who make a big deal about the Rogue One reshoots, like that, there's additional photography all the time, that's not a big deal. But this movie mentions the brother 3 times, which is a very sort of significant kind of screenwriter thing of like, I'm going to mention the beginning, and then he's going to come up at the end, the middle, and then at the end. But then the payoff is nothing. And it's like, why do we talk
really
about the
is
brother
nothing.
so
I
much?
think the brother came to see him in the book in prison a lot. Maybe there was another brother, and that's the third brother. But it leads me to believe that maybe prison got left out. Like it was just too long.
Maybe.
And then they just figured his connection to the Italian mob differently. I don't know.
And this movie is long as it is.
Because
We
clearly,
said, yes, it's over 2 hours.
Yeah, Eastwood was in it. Scott Eastwood was in it to some extent at some important point, obviously.
Yeah.
Because there's a big thing at the end that is relevant to the brother, but it's weird because you haven't.
Yeah, it's like, who cares?
who cares?
Why are we talking about the brother
It's
again?
just, and Eastwood, yeah, I mean, Eastwood, what am I doing with Eastwood? So Affleck is, you know, I really capable of being a really good actor, and he's often been, playing interesting characters, and I really like Chris Messina, who plays his number 2, but it's just, there's a flatness to him. Like, I was psyched. I was like, oh, cool, this book I like, and Affleck, and Chris Messina.
I want to
and
mention
then-
Matthew Mayer as the
yeah.
Klan guy.
He's creepy.
Is so good.
yeah.
He's a real creepy, like classic sort of character actor scene stealer where you're just like, every time he's on screen, you get uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it's because so many movies, like they'll take a character in the Klan and they'll make him seem maniacal in some way. And this guy is calculating and human in the worst possible ways. But there's he makes that a really, really interesting character. And Chris Cooper also, like the fact that these 3 critical characters are actors who I like, or at least play characters that I know I like and would be into, and they just everything flat. Chris Cooper, who's so great at everything.
He has some moments, but
He has some moments, but then like his resolution is
Oh,
so
that's terrible.
It's kind
terrible.
of silly.
Terrible.
It's
Yeah.
so characteristically silly as far as the rest of the movie goes.
Yeah.
All right, so what are our numbers in? I'm saying 5.
3.5 purely for the production design, art directing department, and for Robert Richardson.
Okay.
I'm going to give it a 5.
Are you?
5.
What did I say?
You said 6. You want to change it?
If I gave it a 5, that would change it to 18.5, so the 4.6, something like that.
All right.
4.6.
Yeah, I
Anyway.
give it a 5. Everybody in gray gives it a 5.
We are all dressed the same. That's true.
Yeah, it's disappointing.
Okay.
Where's it at? Bad. 28 it was.
Yeah, it's pretty low.
And that makes it
28%.
sound like it's actively bad. It's not actively
No, it's not
bad.
actively bad.
It's
No,
well-intentioned.
Well
certainly,
intentioned,
it's
looks
just-
pretty. It's okay. It's just it's not.
And-
not
and-
great.
It's a disappointment from this director.
Exactly, yeah, we know he can do better.
Yes.
Bye.